Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Pewaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape our community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
Today, the federal criminal trial starts for Judge Hannah Dugan. Dugan is a Milwaukee County Circuit Court judge who's accused of helping an undocumented immigrant slip out of her courtroom to try and evade ICE agents. To find out more about Dugan's jury trial and what it says about politics today, WUWM reporter Maayan Silver is here in studio. Hi, Maayan.
Hey there, Joy.
So first, what is Dugan charged with?
So Dugan is facing 2 counts. One of them is obstruction. It's a felony. The other one is concealing an individual to prevent arrest. That's a misdemeanor. She was indicted by a grand jury. She entered not guilty pleas in May. And Dugan's jury trial starts today, and she could face up to 6 years in prison if she's convicted. As the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel notes, first-time nonviolent offenders typically get a shorter sentence or probation. That's if she's convicted. For the time being, she's been suspended with pay by the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Sure. Now, as you noted, Dugan says she's innocent. And before we dive into the legal aspects of this trial, can you explain the political implications here?
It's a really unusual case. A judge is accused of helping a defendant evade ICE. You know, there's a Massachusetts judge who was charged federally for a similar action during President Trump's first term. When Biden won in 2020, his Justice Department dismissed those charges, and the judge had to face a disciplinary board instead. Lori Levinson is a former federal prosecutor. She's a current law professor at Loyola Law School. Here's some context from her about why these prosecutions are so rare.
Until this administration, courthouses were by and large off limits to what federal authorities wanted to do, certainly for immigration enforcement. And there was this general understanding and respect that ICE could do their arrests, they could go people's homes, they could take them off the streets, but the courthouses should not be disrupted for lots of reasons, because you don't want people not to come to their court proceedings, and because the courthouses have to deal with a range of issues, whether it be criminal actions or others. So there was this understanding that the feds would not interfere with the operation of courthouses. Now, of course, all of that has gone out the window with the current administration and Department of Justice, who's been extremely aggressive in how they've tried to do their immigration enforcement.
So I would imagine that this entire situation has made it so Judge Dugan is a controversial figure, a pariah to some and a hero to others.
Yes, people on the left say this case is a symbol of bullying, authoritarianism, and that the fact she was arrested at the Milwaukee County Courthouse in May on the job in such a public way also showed that this administration wants to make an example of her. On the right, Trump and his top officials have gone after Dugan publicly. FBI Director Kash Patel posted a photo on social media site X of Dugan in handcuffs with the caption, "No one is above the law." He then deleted it. He posted another message commending FBI agents. Attorney General Pam Bondi commented about the case on Fox News, and Trump himself reposted commentary on Truth Social. At one point, the Department of Homeland Security called Dugan an activist judge on X as well.
Sure. So can you break down the issues this case has tapped into?
There are really widespread concerns over the Trump administration's immigration enforcement efforts. Some people support them, but Dugan's trial is also coming at a time of really unprecedented litigation by and against the Trump administration, and there's been some pushback against Trump. Grand juries in D.C., Chicago, elsewhere, they're really refusing to indict people protesting ICE. The man charged with throwing his sandwich at a federal agent was acquitted last month. Federal lawsuits are being dismissed or not charged against Trump adversaries like former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Here's what politics professor Barry Burden had to say about it. He's with UW-Madison.
I do think there are two dimensions going on in this drama simultaneously. One is the debate about immigration and the ICE raids under the Trump administration, and this particular person who's now been deported from the U.S. and was at issue in what happened in the courtroom. The second dimension is about the battle between the Trump administration and the courts. There have been a record number of federal lawsuits filed against actions of the Trump administration on everything from immigration actions to how they're treating universities and law firms and other businesses to cuts to the federal government, actions overseas, just a tremendous amount of activity. And the Trump administration has been rebuffed in a lot of those cases. Their actions have been stopped, overturned, or at least put on hold. And it connects to the gripes, frankly, that Donald Trump has about the court system. He thinks that liberal judges are acting against him in a biased way. So there's sort of two trains running here simultaneously. And I think it all coming together in one case has just made what is kind of a small event in the city of Milwaukee turn into a national story.
Also, there's a discussion here from a legal perspective about what is the role and purview of state court judges and federal immigration enforcement.
Yeah, can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, well, immigration enforcement is solely the responsibility of the federal government. States don't have the power to enforce federal immigration law, even though there's been a lot of attempts by the current administration to enlist the support of local law enforcement for federal purposes. Also, state court judges have a significant amount of autonomy on their end over how they want to control their courtrooms. I talked to John Gross about this. He's director of the Public Defender Project at UW Law School, and he gave a hypothetical situation. Law enforcement wants to arrest someone and asks the court to hold the defendant's case until the afternoon. It's morning and the defendant's there. Gross explains what the judge could decide.
I have to do other things this afternoon. I'm not holding up this court's calendar. I'm not making the attorney stay here till the afternoon to call this case. They have to be on trial with another judge, so I need to call the case now. Sorry, law enforcement. Now, am I concealing? Am I acting in a corrupt way? I'm certainly making it so that law enforcement is not going to be able to arrest this individual today. But I'm entitled to do that as a judicial officer running my calendar.
So looking at April 18th, when ICE agents came to Dugan's courtroom, what do prosecutors say happened?
Okay, there's a long list here. According to court papers, ICE agents wanted to arrest an undocumented immigrant, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, for being in the U.S. unlawfully. They determined he'd be appearing before Judge Dugan at the county courthouse on April 18th, as you mentioned, on misdemeanor charges of domestic assault. Before court started, ICE agents went to the hallway outside of Dugan's courtroom, court papers say, and told Dugan's clerk that they wanted to arrest Flores Ruiz. Prosecutors claim that once Dugan found out that ICE was there to arrest the man, she became visibly upset, is how they described it. According to the complaint, she went to talk to the agents. They showed her an administrative warrant for the man's arrest. Judge Dugan allegedly told them that they needed a judicial warrant. That's one that's reviewed and approved by a judge. She also allegedly told them to go to the chief judge's office to figure out the proper way to do this. And ultimately, the agents agreed, according to these court documents, to wait until Flores Ruiz's court hearing was done to arrest him in the public hallway of the courthouse. But court papers say that Dugan didn't call Flores Ruiz's case. And there's been some reporting by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel about this, that the case was rescheduled due to logistical problems. They didn't have a court interpreter. And then Dugan set his case for a Zoom hearing. I guess the facts about that will come out at trial. But Dugan then allegedly ushered Flores Ruiz and his attorney out of her courtroom through a back door for jurors. And then Flores Ruiz and his attorney did ultimately end up in the public hallway in the courthouse, but a bit further from where agents had been sitting. Still, agents saw him, and one got on the elevator with him and his attorney, and then they ultimately ended up chasing him outside when he got outside and caught him and arrested him. He's been deported since then. In one filing that's going to be potentially an issue in the case, prosecutors allege that they have evidence of Dugan saying that she would, quote, take the heat for her actions. There's really much more to it, obviously. There's video surveillance of much of this from courthouse cameras, though that's without sound. The parties are also debating the admissibility of audio recordings of Dugan inside her courtroom, such as the one I had mentioned about the taking of the heat. So, yeah, we'll see what ends up there.
That really gets to what the prosecution has to prove in this case. What are they tasked with here?
So the burden of proof is always on prosecutors. They have to convince 12 jurors to unanimously agree that Dugan committed the two crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. And one of the legal experts I talked to that you've heard from, Lori Levinson, says that might be difficult, and that's because the charges have to do with Dugan's intent. We were just talking about concealing an individual. That's one of the counts. But here's what Levinson says overall about what prosecutors have to prove.
All this case is about is what was going on in the judge's head. Whether she was trying to conceal someone, whether she was trying to impede and obstruct a proceeding, or whether she was trying to do what she thought was her job, run her courtroom, deal with her cases, and try to keep from having the Department of Homeland Security interfere with that, with an action that she didn't have advance notice of or really a clear direction of how she was supposed to deal with it.
Both the former prosecutors and the defense attorneys I've spoken with agree that what Dugan was thinking as the events unfolded on April 18th is really key to the case.
Yeah. Do you have any insights on what the defense is going to argue?
The defense has been pretty tight-lipped. What we do know is that they filed a motion in November that describes the Milwaukee County Courthouse policy on ICE arrests as sort of in flux. It says that Chief Judge Carl Ashley, who's also a witness in the case, was working on a policy which would dictate where in the courthouse ICE could safely arrest people. There were some draft policies and some emails between Dugan and others that they're going to try to introduce. Here's John Gross, who I mentioned from the Public Defender Project. He's not involved in the case.
I would expect the defense to introduce some of those memos that were going back and forth. Maybe both sides might want to introduce them because they might argue about what some of the wording in those memos might have influenced Judge Dugan's understanding of what was going on or might be relevant to her mental state, right? If the chief judge sent a memo saying, don't interfere with ICE agents making arrests in the hallways, okay, well, she's been given instructions not to do that. Does she now have a corrupt intent? But if the memo is equivocal in some way, and it's a memo saying from the chief judge, I'm engaged in ongoing discussions about how this can be done in a way that satisfies all the parties, and I understand concerns about the chilling effect that immigration enforcement could have in the courthouse. However, I know you all have legitimate concern. But, whatever it says in there is going to be relevant to show what Judge Dugan was thinking based on those memos.
Gross explains that what is going to be in dispute is what her intent was. Dugan can only be convicted if a jury finds she was doing what she did with a, quote, corrupt intent or a corrupt purpose.
Now, it is a jury trial, as you've mentioned. What are the possible outcomes?
So a jury, all 12 people, would have to unanimously agree to either convict or acquit Dugan. One way Dugan could be acquitted is if a jury doesn't think the government has proven its case. That's what you automatically think of. Another way is through something called jury nullification. Defense lawyers are explicitly not allowed to argue for this in federal court, but it can still happen. So according to Josh Blackman, he's a law professor at South Texas College of Law in Houston, this is what he said.
Nullification goes down a different path. Nullification says, okay, let's assume she did it. Let's assume she had the right state of mind, the right intent. But this prosecution is unjust, right? The government's wrong for bringing this case. or the law itself is unjust. We should not prohibit judges in the state court from helping these aliens, right? Nullification would be saying to the prosecutor, we don't care what the law says. We're going to get rid of your case because we think it's wrong.
If all the jurors can't agree, there could be a mistrial. That means the case could be tried again. But experts say the government would likely look at how many people were holding out from a guilty verdict, and that could make a difference as to whether the case would get charged again.
Well, we will see what the future holds. Maayan, thank you so much for joining us and keeping us posted on this trial.
Thanks, Joy.
Maayan Silver is a WUWM news reporter. She'll be covering the federal criminal trial of Milwaukee Judge Hannah Dugan, and we'll be hearing updates from her as the trial continues.
You can find more interviews like this one by visiting WUWM.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.